So it seems like the angriest, fightiest sisters of battle are getting a whole new set of rules. Let's talk about the Bloody Rose. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today we're talking about the new rules for the Bloody Rose Order, recently previewed over on Warhammer Community. It seems that these girls are going to be the next target for a sub-faction to get its own expansion. Let's start off by talking about the Bloody Rose in general, and the new Codex supplement that's going to be coming out, and then we'll take a quick look at each of the rules and upgrades that Warhammer Community has given us. So first up, out of the Sisters of Battle orders, I think the Bloody Rose are a really fun one to run. They're basically the dedicated melee Sisters of Battle, with +1 attack on the first round of combat, and also AP-1 as well. It means that basically if you have any Sisters of Battle melee unit, it's likely to be a bit more dangerous in Bloody Rose than anywhere else. On top of that, you can also take the Sacred Rite with exploding 6s to hit as well. So compared with the base datasheet of the model's attacks, you can make some seriously fighty Sisters units. Bloody Rose are absolutely great for units like Repentia, Celestian Sacrosancts or Zephyrim, and even make things like Standard Battle Sisters a little bit more of a threat in melee. They're certainly not going to be killing elite units, but they might be a little bit better against skirmishing against other factions like troops. I think they're also perhaps the best order for those new Sisters of Battle Novitiate. With their relatively low AP relic weapons, you can be throwing out a pretty crazy amount of attacks at a fairly low points cost. In addition to that, I really like their stratagem, Tear Them Down. That's 1 command point to auto wounds on 6s to hit. That's particularly nice for the Sister of Battle, to be honest. Most of their attacks come at a relatively low strength in combat, so being able to activate this when you need it is just properly good for punching up against very tough targets. It's perhaps doubly great on Repentia as well, as they get the built-in Zealot rerolls to hit, so then you wind up with a lot more 6s than you would normally have, and a lot more auto wounds. Otherwise, their Warlord trait is +1 attack and advance and charge, not too bad for a fighty canoness that you want to deliver into the melee, and their Chainsaw Beneficence is okay as well, strength 5 AP-2 and damage 1, and you get +3 attacks and more versus hordes. The lack of damage does hamper it a bit, but it's still not too bad. Basically, if you have a whole load of Sisters melee units, then Bloody Rose are going to be one of the strongest ways to field them. It's not uncommon to see Bloody Rose allied alongside a different order, one that gives a bit more benefit to shooting units. In general, I find it a little bit more interesting that they're getting a Codex supplement than Armated Lady, as it means that a few niche but useful stratagems could really see a lot of play. The new Codex supplement is coming out in the Vigilus Alone book, which as normal I describe as an annoying delivery system for a potentially interesting set of new rules. These books always seem to cost far more than I'd really be willing to pay for a small supplement for an army, as of course they don't just let you buy the supplement on its own, you have to pay for all the rest of the book as well. Perhaps a whole bunch of Crusade rules and rules for other armies that you might not necessarily want. It is kind of frustrating that this puts the Sisters up to 3 books that they need to complete all of their options now. Though admittedly, I think in reality very few people are ever going to buy the Sisters Codex plus both of these expansions. I imagine very few people are going to have armies of both Armated Lady and Bloody Rose. By not getting this, you're not really losing out on too much. Bloody Rose are already very strong indeed, and I must admit the supplemental rules from Armated Lady were kind of passable, I thought. Maybe the most interesting thing being able to build an excessively fighty canoness with loads of mortal wounds, but a lot of the rest just seemed a touch situational. In any case, I would expect something somewhat in line with the previous supplement for them. Maybe 3 Warlord traits, 4 relics and 8 stratagems like Armated Lady got. I'm sure those numbers might be tweaked a little bit up or down, but will probably be somewhere in that kind of ballpark. Moving on, let's take a look at the rules that Games Workshop have actually previewed for us. First up, we have a Paragon Warsuit stratagem buff called Wade into the Foe. This one has got the potential to be very, very powerful, but unfortunately it's also really quite situational. You can only use it when your Paragon Warsuits charge into a unit that's got 6 or more models in it, but when you do and you use this stratagem, then any unmodified hit roll of a 4+ will generate 1 additional hit. Admittedly, this is an absolutely massive damage boost for them. It's plus 75% to their already quite decent damage output with the swords, or basically double damage with the maces, as they're only hitting on 4s anyway. Pretty much seems like an auto-use stratagem, if you think there's a chance that those Paragon Warsuits aren't going to be able to pick up what they charged. It's kind of extra nasty as well, as it also combos well with the Bloody Rose charge benefit. All of those suits will also get +1 attack and an extra better AP-1. The issue is that they have to be charging a unit that's got 6 or more models in though. There aren't tons and tons of those about in 40k at the moment. A lot of people like to use 5-man squads or less, and also they have to be on the charge, not being charged, another potential point of failure. In reality, I don't really think that this stratagem is currently all that important, as it's a bit situational and Paragon Warsuits aren't really being played as much right now. If there was ever a unit that I suspect Games Workshop might reduce the points cost of though, the Paragon Warsuits certainly seem like they could be a candidate. They're new shiny Games Workshop models, and they gave them really underwhelming rules when they dropped. I wouldn't at all be surprised to see their points cost go down in chapter approved. Next up we have an interesting Shoots on Death one. Fueled by Rage is either 1 or 2 command points, 2 command points if you use it on Retributors. Basically you pick a Bloody Rose core unit that's being shot in the shooting phase. When you lose one of the models, on a 4+ they get to shoot in death. Again, it's a rule that feels very Sisters, they absolutely love becoming martyrs, and I think it just pairs quite well with the way that the army tends to play in general, maybe fairly fragile units dealing massive damage, but then getting taken out relatively easily in return. This means that potentially for a command point, you might be able to deal a lot more damage in return when they do die. Say for example, if you had a Dominion squad with some Storm Bolters or Melter Guns, being able to get off a flurry of shots in the opponent's turn could be really massive. The way that you'd really want to use this is if you can actually kill something that hasn't dealt damage yet. Perhaps the best way would be if your Retributor squad gets targeted by something massive, you think it's going to die, pop this for 2 CP, and then hopefully use your multi-melter shots to fry an enemy tank that hasn't shot and then deny it its damage. As it's a core unit, it would seem to work with things like Paragon Warsuits as well. Again, could be another small helpful buff for them in Bloody Rose, and it could potentially be fun on something like Handflamer Seraphim as well. Even just a few strength 4 hits might be enough to finish off a key objective scoring squad. Finally, we have a Warlord trait and a relic, though I must admit that neither of these are massively overwhelming to me. There's an anti-character one called Fiery Example. The Warlord gets +1 to wound in melee against characters, and if she does manage to slay any characters, they get 2 miracle dice. Again, for me that just seems far too situational. +1 to wound is nice, but it's not going to help you out against the vast majority of the enemy army. And even with that buff, I think you're unlikely to kill too many enemy characters in your average game of 40k. Sisters HQs can punch up well, but they aren't exactly the scariest things out there in the game. I'd much rather take something that provides more reliable buffs or damage output. Finally, we've got the Armour of True Sacrifice. This gives you a 2+ armor save to your character, and also if the bearer loses any wounds, then you gain an additional miracle dice. The 2+ save isn't a terrible durability buff, but a lot of weapons that want to target characters really won't care too much. If you want durability, I'd be much more tempted by something like the Mantle of Ophelia for a Canoness, and I guess the idea is that you lose multiple wounds on multiple turns and then gain a fair few miracle dice. I think in reality that's unlikely to happen too often. Even with 5 wounds, a 4+ invul and a 2-up save, I think there's every chance that once a Canoness is exposed to enemy attacks, there's a good chance she might well just die. Still good for 1 additional miracle dice, but I'm not sure it's going to be too often that you're going to be able to farm them like this. For relics, I think I'd be a lot more tempted by something that makes her a bit more dangerous in melee, particularly as your Bloody Rose, and you could certainly make great use of something like the Blade of St. Eleanor with its massive damage 3. So overall, I think it's quite cool that Bloody Rose are getting a supplement, if as usual it's not delivered in a very helpful way whatsoever. The rules that we've seen previewed I think seem a bit situational, though I will certainly have a look forward to reading through the rules once we get them. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that, or just any more news and rumours of Games Workshop releases. I do tend to post regular 40k videos most days. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways, with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.